It's not that long ago that we were bombarded with images and news of waves of migrants around the world. One of the most striking examples today is the situation in Venezuela, where thousands of people are trying to cross borders to escape a cruel and inhumane reality. But what if the country in question is not marked by conflict or economic chaos? What about a place considered to be one of the safest, most democratic, liberal, and with a high quality of life, which is nevertheless being left behind by its own population? This is the reality in Uruguay. So what happened? Why are Uruguayan citizens leaving a country often seen as the Swiss standard of Latin America? What makes someone leave a place with so much progress and stability? Today, Bello Mundo takes you to explore a Uruguay that defies expectations and hides a reality that is more complex and darker than you might imagine. Number 1. Location and geographical data. Uruguay may be small in territory, but it's huge in personality. Located between giants Brazil and Argentina, it stretches along South America's Atlantic coast, with the Rio de la Plata serving as a frame for its vibrant capital, Montevideo. Despite its modest size, just 176,000 square kilometers, the country stands out for its giant strength. With around 3.5 million inhabitants, most of the population is concentrated in urban areas, especially in the capital. But make no mistake, there is much more than modern cities and popular beaches. From vast plains known as the Pampas, to rolling hills and a coastline full of beaches that rival the best tourist destinations, Uruguay offers a geographical variety that surprises. But this varied geography, it's not the only thing that catches the eye. Number 2. History and current affairs. With its political stability, outstanding social progress, and eye-catching quality of life, Uruguay has earned itself the nickname of the Switzerland of South America over the years. But it wasn't always like this. The country has faced turbulent times, from colonial disputes to moments of great political and economic instability in the 20th century. It was only with a lot of effort and deep reforms that Uruguay reinvented itself and reached the level we see today. This transformation didn't happen overnight and is marked by progressive choices that have challenged paradigms. In other words, the country is well on the way, and there are plenty of examples. But let's start, for example, with a controversial topic: drugs. Number 3. Pioneer in legalizing cannabis. While many countries are still debating the pros and cons of legalization, Uruguay went and made history in 2013. That's right. Uruguay didn't stop at the debate. In 2013, it became the first country in the world to legalize the production, sale, and consumption of the plant. While other nations were still debating, Uruguayans were already putting everything into practice, showing that they are not afraid to dare. The idea, led by then-President José Mujica, yes, that charismatic gentleman who drove a VW Beetle, was clear: reduce drug trafficking, control the quality of the product, and, what's more, offer a safer alternative for consumers. No clandestine schemes or unnecessary risks. It was a bet on public health and harm reduction, with a touch of Uruguayan pragmatism. Of course, the decision caused a stir around the world. Some people thought it was brilliant and others turned up their noses. But Uruguay stood firm. Weed is now sold in pharmacies with state control and regulated prices. A totally non-standard model, but one that proved to be more than just a revolutionary idea. It was a social experiment in action, and that's how it became a global reference and generated curiosity and even a little envy around the world. But do you think it stopped there? Of course not. Number 4. LGBTQ rights and inclusion. When it comes to rights and inclusion, Uruguay leaves no one behind. In a region where many battles are still ongoing, the country has made huge strides and was one of the first to legalize same-sex marriage, as well as legalizing cannabis. This decision, which seemed bold to many, reinforced Uruguay's commitment to equality and justice. And that's not all. Not only did Uruguay open the door to equal marriage, but it also advanced policies that guarantee rights and protections for the LGBTQ community. From anti-discrimination legislation to advances in adoption rights, the country shows that inclusion is not empty talk, it's practice. Here, the idea is simple. Loving and being who you are shouldn't be a reason for inequality. What could be more progressive than that? But it's not just looking forward that draws attention, is it? In fact, in addition to having this forward and liberal mentality, the country is an example of good living. Number 5. Quality of life to envy. When it comes to quality of life, Uruguay doesn't disappoint. With one of the highest human development indexes in Latin America, the country seems to have found a balance that many only dream of. Here, health, education, and well-being are more than promises in political speeches. They are concrete realities that impress. Let's start with health. The public system offers free access to hospitals and clinics with competent professionals, guaranteeing care for all citizens. In education, the situation is also enviable. The best university in the country, UDELAR, is free and without entrance exams, a policy based on the belief that education is a right for everyone. Private institutions exist, but anyone can study without spending a penny. And when it comes to lifestyle, Uruguay offers a routine that many people crave. It's common to find people relaxing in parks with friends and family, or closing up store on Sundays to slow down. The pace is relaxed, valuing simple moments like a sunset, a walk on the beach, or a good plate of food. Even in big cities, the atmosphere is reminiscent of small towns, efficient public transport, little traffic, and plenty to do on foot. And behind this enviable status, there's more. The economy is one of the most stable in the region, with a GDP per capita of $22,000, according to the World Bank, which puts it in the high-income category. The infrastructure works well, education is accessible, and violence is controlled, with homicide rates well below those of many of its neighbors. And there's an important detail. The Uruguayan government has a reputation for clean management, without the scandals that taint so many other nations. In 2022, it topped the Corruption Perception Index in Latin America and ranked 18th in the world, with a score of 73 out of 100. With all this, it's clear that Uruguay is a country that turns policies into tangible realities, an example of quality of life that rightly provokes envy. So, yes, it's a country to be envied, not just for the numbers, but for the way it turns policies into reality. Number 6. 100% green energy. And speaking of examples, Uruguay is second to none when it comes to sustainability. Around 98% of the country's electricity comes from renewable sources. That's right, almost all the energy that powers the country is clean. And they haven't limited themselves to just one source. Wind power, solar power, hydroelectric power. It seems that Uruguay has decided to collect the whole package of green solutions. Since the early 2000s, Uruguay has invested heavily in sustainable policies, attracting investment and creating partnerships to transform its energy sector. Today, Uruguay's energy scene is a global benchmark. the envy of great powers. But it's not all about work, right? Quality of life also means enjoying life in a variety of ways, and Uruguay doesn't let anyone down when it comes to pleasure. But calm your polluted mind. We're not talking about pleasure in four walls. We're talking about the pleasure of eating. And let's face it, what better way to enjoy it than eating well? Number 7. Gastronomy. Uruguayan gastronomy is a real experience for the palate. Let's start with the barbecue. And we're not talking about just any barbecue, but the famous Uruguayan asado. Prepared with patience and mastery, it is a social event in itself, where the meat is grilled slowly on a parrilla until it reaches the perfect point. And the feast of flavors doesn't stop there. Uruguayan wines, especially those made from the Tannat grape, are a true national gem, winning admirers around the world. A glass of this full-bodied wine, a good piece of meat, and of course, dulce de leche. In Uruguay, dulce de leche is not just a sweet, it's a passion. Whether in desserts or even plain, it steals the show and wins hearts. And if you're more in the mood for a leisurely snack, there's the chivito, a sandwich filled with meat, cheese, bacon, egg, and much more. Basically, a warm hug in the form of food. And of course, we can't leave out the mate ritual. If you're a fan of this iconic drink, Uruguay is paradise. Here, per capita consumption of mate is the highest in the world, and the drink is much more than a tea. It's a daily, almost sacred tradition that connects friends and families. And just when you think it can't get any better, Uruguay comes along and says, calm down. There's still culture and entertainment. Number 8. The world's longest carnival. When we talk about carnival, it's natural to think of Brazil, with its grandiose parades and electric trios that shake the streets for 4 days. Salvador, the land of carnival, stretches the revelry out a little further, with celebrations spread over 12 days. But if you think that's too much, wait until you get to Uruguay, where the party is in no hurry to end. Here, carnival goes far beyond expectations. For 40 days, from January to March, the country is transformed into a continuous spectacle of colors, music, and energy. It's the longest carnival in the world. It's not just about costume parades. It's a true cultural celebration, with street performances, makeshift stages, murgas and candombe, rhythms with African roots that will get anyone moving. Who needs 4 days of carnival when you can have almost 2 months? Number 9. Football powerhouse. And while we're on the subject of Brazil, there's another passion that the country shares with its neighbors: soccer. Okay, they have fewer titles than the Brazilians, but that doesn't diminish the pride and passion they have for every shot on goal. Officially, Uruguay has 2 world titles, and they make a point of remembering it. In 1930, they were the first nation to host and win a World Cup, beating Argentina 4-2 at the Centenario Stadium in Montevideo. It was the tournament's premiere, and they had already shown the world that they didn't come to play. But that's only the first part of the legend. The real epic took place in 1950 against Brazil at home. Imagine a stadium packed with almost 200,000 people, confident that the hosts would win the trophy. But against all the odds, Uruguay turned the game against Brazil in the final minutes, leaving the stadium in absolute silence. It was a feat that became a milestone in world soccer. For the Uruguayans, an eternal glory. For the Brazilians, a trauma that echoes to this day. And if you're wondering why they have 4 stars on their shirts, the answer is simple. In addition to the 2 World Cups, they also consider the Olympic titles of 19024 and 19028 to be World Cups. A bit controversial, I know. Number 10. Destinations not to be missed. But as we continue our journey, in addition to excellent development indices, examples of inclusion, epic food, and a passion for soccer, if there's one thing that really makes Uruguay win hearts, it's its unique landscapes and places. As we've already mentioned, this country has stunning beaches and a natural diversity that impresses any visitor. Hills, lagoons, parks, and protected areas. There's no shortage of options for those seeking a special contact with nature. Let's start with the jewel in the crown, Punta del Este. Known internationally, this city is the perfect destination for those who want to enjoy incredible beaches, lively nightlife, and that sophisticated seaside resort feel. But it's not all glamour. If you prefer something quieter, Cabo Polonio is the place for you. A rustic village where the dunes and the sea meet, with no electricity in many of the houses. The sunsets here are breathtaking. Jose Ignacio is another option for those looking for exclusivity and charm, with its white sandy beaches and refined restaurants. A little further north, La Paloma is ideal for surfers and families who want to enjoy the coast in a relaxed atmosphere. And we can't forget the national parks, such as Santa Teresa Park, with its historic fortress and trails that cross forests, or Cabo Polonio National Park, with its exuberant flora and fauna. There's also the Garzon Lagoon, a paradise for those who love water sports and breathtaking views. All in all, Uruguay shows that, as well as being a powerhouse in so many respects, it is also a place to relax, take a deep breath, and be enchanted by landscapes that seem to have come out of a dream. However, as the saying goes, not all that glitters is gold. As we've already mentioned, there's a problematic side that isn't always shown, and which has a big impact on the lives of Uruguayans. Did you know that, despite all the benefits, many Uruguayans decide to leave the country and seek opportunities abroad? It may seem paradoxical for a place with so many advances, but there are reasons for this. But why would anyone consider leaving such a country? That's what we're going to explore now, presenting Side B, the part that almost nobody shows. And just a warning, as in any country, there are challenges to be faced. After all, each person has different perceptions, and what is a negative point for some may not be relevant to others. Our aim here is not to belittle Uruguay, but to show the other side of the coin with respect and clarity, including presenting you with their vision. And look how curious. According to a recent BBC article, in economic terms, for example, Uruguayans tend to respond to surveys with pessimism and anguish, despite having the highest income per person in the region for 7 years, a poverty rate of European countries, and the economy growing steadily over the last 16 years. And while we're on the subject, it's worth mentioning that we made a very similar video about the B side of the United States, a reality that can be quite shocking. Did you know, for example, that in the heart of Los Angeles, there is a neighborhood known for housing one of the largest concentrations of homeless people and drug users in the United States? In addition, unemployment is a cruel reality for many. More and more evicted people are living in their cars, parked in places like Walmart, and rely on food donations to survive. A situation that makes us reflect on the disparities within one of the world's largest economies. So, after watching this video, be sure to check it out. What's it like to be poor in the United States? I guarantee it's full of information that will change your view of the land of opportunity. But back to Uruguay, let's explore the reasons why many people leave the country, as well as other points that bring challenges and contradictions to this nation that seems perfect at first glance. Number 11. High cost of living. First of all, among the reasons why many Uruguayans leave the country is the cost of living, which is one of the highest in the region. To understand the impact of this, let's take a practical example. In Rivera, a Uruguayan city on the border with Brazil, a resident buying 180 grams of toothpaste can pay around 243 pesos, the equivalent of $6. But you only have to cross the street to Santa Ana do Livramento on the Brazilian side to find the same paste for around $1.30. That's right, a stark difference. And it's not just a one-off issue. Products in general in Uruguay tend to be much more expensive. A study carried out by the Center for Development Studies in partnership with the Central Bank of Uruguay showed that, on average, prices in the country are 27% higher than in 43 other countries analyzed. To give you an idea, when compared to developed European nations such as France, Germany, and the United Kingdom, Uruguay still loses out in terms of affordability. The higher costs affect several areas. Hygiene and cleaning products are up to 58% more expensive than the global average. Food and non-alcoholic drinks, 55%, and computer and electronic goods, 43% more expensive. In relation to Latin American neighbors, the difference is also marked. In Uruguay, prices are more than double those in Bolivia, 80% higher than in Mexico, and 20% higher than in Brazil and Argentina. For Uruguayans, this reality often means looking for alternatives outside the country, where the cost of living can be more affordable. After all, living in a place with a high quality of life is great, but when prices are so high, it ends up weighing on everyone's pocket. But what is the reason for such high prices? Number 12. Small population. There are several reasons behind this phenomenon, and they go beyond random prices or market choices. To begin with, Uruguay, with its just over 3 million inhabitants, faces a challenge reminiscent of a country like Switzerland, its small size and lack of economies of scale. While large markets manage to dilute costs, smaller countries see their prices rise precisely because there are fewer consumers to share the costs. And just like in Switzerland, the quality of life in Uruguay is high, with first-rate public services, safety, and well-being. But this comes at a cost, literally. The burden of maintaining high-quality infrastructure, access to health and education, directly impacts the prices of goods and services. Number 13. Imports and high taxes. Another major factor is dependence on imports. Unlike Switzerland, which has an industrialized economy and a large export capacity, Uruguay needs to bring in many products from abroad. Even with agreements like Mercosur, the costs of logistics, transportation, and taxes end up inflating prices. As a result, products that arrive at a reasonable price end up being sold at much higher prices on the shelves. One study found that the average price of products in Uruguay is up to 27% higher than in other parts of the world. High taxes are also part of the problem, and when compared to other European countries with high living costs, such as Denmark or Norway, it can be seen that Uruguay also suffers from a relatively closed market and less competition. This means that, in many areas, prices remain high because there are few competitors to reduce costs. Just so you have an idea, you know that toothpaste we talked about earlier? That's right. For hygiene products, electronics, and food, Uruguay is often more expensive than even European countries like France and Germany. This high cost of living forces many Uruguayans to seek alternatives abroad in order to maintain a more affordable standard of living. Again, it's clear that living in a country with a high quality of life is great, but it comes at a price that not everyone can afford. But then you might be wondering, Didn't you say earlier that they're well paid? So that's not the problem, right? Wrong. In the overall context, things are more different and complex than you might think. Number 14. High salaries. Who would have thought that earning well could be a problem, right? But calm down. The issue isn't exactly high salaries. The real villain for many Uruguayans is the mismatch between what they earn and what they spend on a daily basis. Let's understand this better. Uruguay has the highest GDP per capita in Latin America at around $22,000 a year, according to the World Bank. To give you an idea, each Uruguayan family earns, on average, around $2,500 a month. Sounds good, right? On paper, yes. But in practice, the high cost of living complicates things. Compared to Spain, for example, where the average monthly income for a family is $3,200, the difference is even more obvious. There, not only do you earn more, but prices are around 25% lower, which makes every euro worth more. And if we talk about expensive countries like Copenhagen, the scenario is different. High salaries are accompanied by a commensurate quality of life. In Uruguay, on the other hand, the cost of living remains high, but salaries don't keep pace. The result of this imbalance is that many Uruguayans feel that what they earn is quickly swallowed up by everyday expenses. So, yes, Uruguay pays well by regional standards, but the very high cost of living means that this high salary loses some of its luster. Sounds like a paradox, doesn't it? Earning more, but feeling that the money doesn't go as far as it should. But be aware that the economy isn't the only reason many Uruguayans pack their bags and leave. Even with good rates, the feeling of security, the quality of education and job opportunities still leave a lot to be desired for many residents. And there's also a sensitive side that deserves attention: the vulnerability of certain groups of the population. Number 15. The elderly and children vulnerable. It may surprise you, but Uruguay faces a shocking fact. It has the second highest suicide rate in Latin America, second only to Guyana. According to the World Health Organization, there were 23 deaths per 100,000 inhabitants in 2023, double the world average. But why does a country with such positive indices face such a grim reality? Well, the answer isn't simple. Experts point to several factors that combine, including social, family, and personal issues. But one point always comes up. The most vulnerable groups are the elderly and adolescents. Uruguay, with a life expectancy that compares to developed countries, has the second oldest population in Latin America, second only to Cuba. This means that around 12% of Uruguayans are over 60. Sounds great to live longer, right? But the problem is that public support systems are often not enough, and private options are very expensive. For many older people, this means dealing with loneliness and a lack of support. And when we look at young people, the situation is just as worrying. 1 in 5 children in Uruguay is born into poverty. And that's not all. Studies show that around 60% of children suffer some kind of abuse, and the rates of dyslexia, obesity, and iron deficiency are comparable to those in much poorer countries. Number 16. Insecurity. And what couldn't be left out of our black list of challenges faced in Uruguay, we need to talk about an issue that worries many people: the feeling of insecurity. For a long time, the country was synonymous with calm, but this reality has been changing. In recent years, there has been a notable increase in violence rates. In 2023 alone, homicides rose by more than 50%, while robberies rose by more than 40%, both with and without violence. This scenario, although still much better than in much of Latin America, has brought about a change in Uruguayans' perception of security. Everyday conversations, social networks, and the media are full of worrying stories that have led many families to reinforce security in their homes with bars, alarms, and electric fences. In addition, the situation has been complicated by the increase in drug trafficking, since Uruguay has become a transit point for narcotics from neighboring countries such as Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia, and this has helped to boost certain crimes that were not so common before. And so the question arises, what does all this mean? Can't you go, live, and feel safe in Uruguay? The answer is yes. Uruguay remains one of the safest, most prosperous, and egalitarian countries in Latin America. It has its challenges, of course, just like anywhere else, but it's far from being a scenario of total insecurity. It's neither a perfect country nor a failure, it's just Uruguay. And that concludes our journey through fascinating Uruguay and its contrasts. Which part caught your eye the most? Let us know in the comments. We want to know what you thought. If you like exploring nuanced stories, vibrant cultures, and surprising curiosities, keep following. There's much more to discover together here in our Bello Mundo. Thank you for being with us so far, and see you next time.